My mum's not letting my sister-in-law move back in, and honestly, I'm scared I'll never see my niece again. There's a lot of context needed before we get into what's happened this past week. A couple years ago, my older brother, who was 23 at the time, met this girl who was 20, and they started dating. She was 18 and he was 21. They both met as adults, so no, it wasn't anything that bothered me, other than the fact that she's a year younger than me, which is more weird than disturbing. I was working nights and lived across the country at the time, so keep that in mind. They had known each other for a few months before they started dating and were in the same friend group. I actually encouraged him to ask her out after we talked about it one day, so he did. Then only a couple weeks later, I got a phone call saying he proposed and she said yes. Okay, well, it's not my life. Personally, I'd never get engaged to someone that quick, but it's not my decision. So they set a date for only a couple months away. Again, pretty quick, especially considering no one in my family had even met the girl, but whatever, to each their own. Here's where it gets tough. My family had booked tickets to fly out to them for their wedding. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, myself and my parents with my two younger siblings still at home. Everyone had it on their calendars, everyone took off work, and everyone was excited. It was the first wedding on my mum's side, as he's the oldest cousin, and the second on my dad's side. It was a Saturday at noon, over a month before the intended date, when I got the call. Again, I was working nights, so I had been sleeping when the phone woke me up. Groggy, seeing as I typically got home around 4 a.m. and didn't get to bed until around 5 that morning, I answered the phone to hear my brother's voice. He called to let me know they were getting married that night around 6:30, and he was going to send me the Zoom link. I was barely awake and didn't have time to process what he told me before he hung up. I really wasn't sure what was going on. I didn't know if I had done something wrong. I was even asked to be a bridesmaid with my younger sister just a couple weeks prior. But I also didn't have much time to think about it since I was working that night, something that seemed to slip my brother's mind when he asked me to attend. I called my mom, thinking that they had known and were already out there. My parents live on the same side of the country I was living, but she got a similar call an hour or so before I did and was blindsided just as much as me. I later found out that even my grandparents, whom my brother was living with, didn't know about the wedding until the day before, and my other grandparents weren't given the Zoom link. Neither was any other family members, so no one was in on the switch. Again, I had work and was a whole 3 hours ahead of my brother, meaning his 6 p.m. wedding was 9 p.m. for not only me but my parents as well. This was peak times at where I was working. Luckily, I'm a hard worker and a teacher's pet, so my boss loves me and let someone cover my position for a little bit while I got on after overhearing me joke about my brother's wedding and asking why I wasn't there. I joke when I'm hurt, and he knew that, so he knew I was upset. So I got to watch, although stressed out about getting back on time, especially seeing as the ceremony didn't start for a whole half hour after when they said. I had to hop off immediately after, the last thing I saw being my poor mother crying. I ended up having a slight breakdown myself after, and even got sent home by my worried bosses. Before anyone asks, no, they didn't just elope. They had the ceremony in the parking lot of their church, where there were multiple chairs set up, at least 30, all filled with my sister-in-law's family. My grandparents, whom my brother lived with, were the only ones in attendance related to my brother. My mother really struggled after that. Honestly, that's an understatement. Depression runs in my family, which she, my brother and I all share, and she had to up her medications by a scary amount. I ended up moving back home to help her out, specifically with my younger siblings who are homeschooled. My father luckily has been able to work from home a lot more since he got promoted that year, but he goes on work trips for a couple weeks every once in a while. Anyways, I've pretty much lived with my family since then, except for a month trip to Europe earlier this year and a 6-month trip to do volunteer work last summer. I'm skipping a lot of little things that went down in my brother's life as well, in fear of this post getting way longer. But the biggest of those is that she found out she was pregnant 2 months after their wedding. My mom was having some medical issues, but when they told her, it was such a shock that she only got worse. She lost a lot of weight and she slept a lot. Don't think she didn't want a grandkid, that's not it at all. It was just the stress of my brother and sister-in-law's situation on top of them having a baby. They were living in her parents' basement, only living off of my brother's paycheck being a supervisor at a grocery store. She dropped out of high school, hates working, and doesn't see the need to get her GED. He dropped out of college after 3 semesters after his depression got bad. But he's always had good grades and wanted to go into the military like my dad for as long as I can remember. He just couldn't due to being on medication. They also got 2 puppies after they got married and before her pregnancy, even though they could barely afford healthcare for themselves. One puppy they had to get rid of after a month or so because it broke its leg and they couldn't pay for it. So last August, while I was on my trip, they had a sweet baby girl. It took a couple months for my parents to be able to go out to meet her, but we were all able to meet her when we went for Christmas. I'm obsessed with her. She's the cutest little thing and she's so smiley and bubbly and just loves everyone and everything. She's the first grandchild and the first great-grandchild for both sides. Side note, unfortunately my grandpa, whom my brother lived with, passed away early last year, so he never got to meet her. Everything seemed to click in my brother's head that he had a family he needs to care for now, and he started working on finding a better career. He'd been off of meds for a couple years at this point, so he decided to try the military route again, despite my sister-in-law not wanting to be a military spouse. She's never really left her parents, ever. So it was understandably daunting, but she decided to go for it. They moved into our house a couple months ago, right before my Europe trip. Good timing too, because I was going a little crazy having everyone in the house. My brother had quit his job and wasn't looking for another. He was just gaming in the basement for hours with his friends. My parents got on him a couple times because he was low-key a deadbeat dad, not doing anything. And so was my sister-in-law. My niece would constantly be dropped in the room I was in, whether I was busy or not, and I was expected to take care of her. She wasn't eating enough. She wasn't eating solid food when she got here, despite being 8 months old. And she had a diaper rash because they don't change her diaper when she needs it. My sister-in-law treats her almost as if she were a dog and gets mad when my niece doesn't respond to her name getting called or to other commands like, "Come here" or "No, don't put that in your mouth." She's teething and so she's been fussy the past few weeks, and I'm pretty sure she had an ear infection, but they only have like $10 in their bank account. My sister-in-law is the worst shopper I've ever seen. My brother will give her a budget and she consistently spends way over it on things she doesn't need. She always took advantage of my mom, never did any chores around the house, and overall she's just a child. Her parents are very much enablers. Her and her younger sisters are never told no. They would skip half of the school year because they didn't feel like going and their parents would be fine with it. There were no boundaries, and because of that, my sister-in-law isn't good at reading social cues, nor does she really respect social cues. My brother has issues too, mainly in regards to his ego. Don't get me wrong, growing up, he was my best friend, which is why being suddenly pushed away hurts so bad. But we also fought a lot, mainly because he knew how to push my buttons, although he used to deny he was doing it on purpose. I've gotten over it since then, but I haven't really talked to him, mainly because I knew what he'd say. He never admitted he's wrong and will die on every and any hill he deems correct. He doesn't take advice and has admitted while living here that he used to get under my skin just because it was fun, but won't apologize because we all laughed. I didn't. And it was his duty as an older brother. He's maybe apologized once or twice to me my whole life. And he has no idea how to act around my younger siblings, but he pretends like he does. I don't know if he really thinks everything is the same as it was when he moved out 5 years ago, or if he just tries to force it to be. But my siblings aren't kids anymore. They're both teenagers. All in all, it's awkward, annoying, and frankly frustrating to have them here. But my sweet niece was keeping the family together. Family is super important to us. Both of my parents have multiple siblings, and we grew up around our extended family, even second cousins and great aunts and uncles. I grew up with 4 great-grandparents, the first one passing when I was about 13. So to have my niece here was amazing. And we do enjoy hanging out as siblings, as much as I complained about my brother earlier. We love game nights and watching movies together. Hiking and walks are a big thing too. My parents bought her so many toys and books and clothes, and we were so excited to finally be able to spend time with her. I'll admit, I was a little jealous seeing all the pictures of her at her parents' with her sisters, while I had only seen the baby twice. But then my brother finally went to boot camp last week. This was the plan, as we live closer to it than her parents. She was the one who wanted to live here while he was gone for 8 weeks. It was her idea. It's been the plan for months. My younger siblings went on a trip to Canada for a week. They just got back today. Something that had been in the works for a year. It's for a singing group they're in. My parents decided to go spend a weekend to listen to one of their concerts and to have some alone time. Both of their birthdays are coming up this week, but my mum is in charge of a week-long girls' youth camp for our church this week, so she wouldn't be home. So to recap, this past weekend would just be me, my sister-in-law, and the baby. I guess this was too much for my sister-in-law. She made plans with her family for her family to come here, staying in a hotel. We live decently near DC, so it's understandable that they'd want to come visit and see all the sights, specifically for her younger sister's graduation. It somehow turned to my sister-in-law packing a bag, literally the morning my parents were leaving, and asking them to take her to the airport. She just couldn't handle being alone, though I'd be there so she wouldn't have been alone, for a weekend. Also, she's a military spouse now, so I don't know what she'll do if my brother ever has to go away. It seems a bit dramatic saying that this was an unreasonable request, but my mother is very much a planner. She doesn't like when things go askew and had already been stressing about the next few weeks. After her camping trip, we're going to my cousin's in Nashville for 4th of July, so it's a very busy few weeks. So it was so sudden for her to ask while my parents are literally 10 minutes from walking out the door. The airport is over an hour away, in the opposite direction, so yes, it would be a burden to take her. I was by myself all weekend, so I really don't know everything that's happened. And I'm a bit scared to ask, seeing as my parents have fought about this and my mother is stressed about the upcoming weeks. But I guess my sister-in-law isn't invited back to our home. I'm having mixed feelings, mainly because I love my niece, and my brother has been important for me for so long, it's hard to imagine not having either in my life. But they've both been so selfish towards my family, and even with help from my parents, have not been able to grow up. I know it takes time, I get that, but when you're in debt, have a child, and don't have a job or education, you should take advice of people who've been there before, no? My mum has been a military spouse for over 25 years. They got married when she was 19 and he was 21. We were in poverty growing up because he enlisted, and enlisted don't make much money at first. My dad wasn't the greatest in school, got in trouble a lot and only went to a semester of college, but he's worked so hard to get to where he is today. Comfortable, able to provide for his family, work from home most days and take vacations. They're literally the perfect people to take advice from, but neither my sister-in-law nor brother ask or listen to them. There's more drama with my brother and my dad too, but I won't say unless someone asks. There's really not much I can do, and I'm not sure what I'm expecting from this. There's so much I glossed over, but this is already so long. I know there's faults on both sides, but I just wish things were different. My brother still had 7 weeks of boot camp and won't be able to contact us for at least another 2. I don't know what he'll think of the situation. I hope we can solve it. I want to get along with my sister-in-law. I really do. There's just so much there. I never really wanted a relationship with her and I was okay with that. But then the baby came and my brother and I always talked about growing up together and being the best aunts and uncles to our kids. I don't know, I understand why my mum burned that bridge. My sister-in-law and her mother are so disrespectful towards my mum and very selfish. But my sister-in-law grew up with that, so deep down I can't blame her. I can blame her for not growing up though. She's an adult, but she still acts like a spoiled teenager. This isn't my life, and ultimately it doesn't really affect me. I'm going to college with a friend in the fall. I have old co-workers wanting me to move back and room with them. I've got a few jobs I could get. My options are open, which honestly scares me a little, but that's another rant. I'm okay. I'll be okay. Money's pretty tight for me after Europe, but my parents don't make me pay rent. I'm set. I'm good. But it doesn't mean I don't worry about them and get frustrated that they won't listen. It's mainly my worry for my niece. We still have all her toys out, and it makes me sad every time I see them. I didn't know that when my sister-in-law walked out the door with her, or might have been the last time I'll see her in a while. I guess I just want to see what people think of the situation. Let me know if you have any questions or want me to give more details. I have plenty, I just feel bad for the already dreadfully long post.